My daughter-in-law put me in a nursing home and told everyone I was senile. She sold all my jewelry, emptied my closets, and looked me straight in the eyes as she said, "No one believes you anymore. You're staying here." I cried alone for 6 long months, wondering how my life collapsed so quickly. My name is Evelyn Rowe, and I never expected betrayal to come from inside my own family. My son, Daniel, quiet and gentle, trusted his wife Sienna more than he trusted himself. I raised him with everything I had, but somewhere along the way, he learned to fear confrontation more than losing the truth. Sienna used that fear to control everything. She hid behind sweet smiles while she stripped me of the life I built. Then one morning, everything changed. 3 men in black suits walked into the nursing home, asking every nurse where I was. Their voices were firm and urgent. For a moment, I wanted to hide, terrified they were connected to Sienna, but curiosity pushed me to step forward. When I agreed to meet them, they handed me a folder filled with old documents. When I opened it and saw what was inside, I felt the air leave my lungs. My life had not been destroyed by an accident or aging. It had been targeted, planned, and almost taken from me. Stay with me, because this story will show how a forgotten old woman uncovered a truth powerful enough to bring her entire family back to its knees. Before my world fell apart, my days were simple and warm. I lived in the same yellow house my husband Michael and I bought when Daniel was born. That house held everything we ever loved. The smell of Michael's morning coffee, Daniel's childhood drawings, the sound of laughter during summer barbecues with neighbors. Even after Michael passed, I kept every corner of the house full of life. I planted flowers along the walkway so the yard always looked cheerful, and I baked the same oatmeal cookies Michael used to sneak before dinner. For a while, I thought I still had a family to share that life with. Daniel visited often with his son, Liam. My grandson filled the house with energy as he raced his toy cars across the hardwood floors. He loved sitting on my lap while I read him stories. I was happiest when he grabbed my hand and said, "Grandma, don't leave yet. Stay next to me." Sienna, however, never liked having me around. She was polite in public, but inside the home, her voice turned sharp. She complained if I folded Daniel's laundry wrong. She made comments like, "It's time for you to slow down," or "You don't remember things the way you used to." I knew exactly what she was doing, but I stayed quiet because I didn't want tension to affect Daniel or Liam. My younger sister, Marjorie, warned me. She said, "Evelyn, that woman is setting up a story about you. Watch your back." I shrugged it off. I wanted to believe my daughter-in-law was just overwhelmed and not malicious. Then, one morning, I slipped on a rug in the kitchen. I didn't break anything, but my wrist was sore. Sienna showed up that afternoon with a glare that cut through the room. She said, "Daniel, your mother is getting worse. She needs supervision." I tried to defend myself. I just tripped. Anyone could trip. But Sienna talked over me like I wasn't even standing there. She worked fast. Within 2 weeks, she visited 4 doctors, pushing the idea that I was confused and unsafe living alone. By the time Daniel understood what was happening, the paperwork for a temporary care evaluation had already been filed. I begged him to slow down and think. He looked torn but overwhelmed. I watched him rub his temples the same way he did when he was a boy trying to solve a math problem. He whispered, "Mom, I don't know what to believe anymore." Sienna grabbed his arm and said, "Believe the facts." The day they took me to the nursing home, I sat in the back seat of their car staring out the window as we passed the neighborhood I loved. No one asked if I wanted this. No one asked if I was scared. When the door closed behind me at the facility, I felt like a prisoner in a place that pretended to be safe. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I cried most nights, not because I was old, but because the people I trusted chose to believe lies about me. Sienna visited only once to drop off a small bag of clothes. She smiled and said, "Get comfortable." I thought that was all my life would be from then on. until the morning 3 men in black suits walked through the front doors, searching for me with a level of urgency that made the entire building stop and stare. Everything changed from that moment on. Life inside the nursing home settled into a pattern that felt more like surviving than living, and every day reminded me that I had been pushed into a world I did not choose. The nurses tried their best, but nothing could replace the freedom of waking up in my own bed or watering the flowers in my yard. I missed the smell of my house, the pictures on the wall, and the simple sound of Liam's laughter. Sienna rarely answered my call, and when she did, she spoke as if she were humoring a confused child. Daniel visited once every 2 weeks, staying only long enough to check a box in his mind before hurrying home. Whenever I tried to explain how Sienna had taken my jewelry, my clothes, and even Michael's old, Daniel grew uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair and told me I must be remembering things wrong. Each time he said that, it felt like a piece of my heart was being peeled away. The loneliness inside that place pressed against me until it became something physical. Some nights I cried into my pillow until it was damp, because I could not believe my life had been reduced to a locked room, 3 bland meals a day, and staff who barely had time to talk. My only comfort was Nurse Ruth, a warm and steady woman who always found reasons to check on me. She helped me brush my hair on days when my hands trembled and brought me tea that tasted like home. One afternoon, she found me sitting alone in the courtyard and sat beside me without asking permission. She said, "Mrs. Rowe, someone like you does not belong here unless someone wanted you here." Her voice was gentle but full of meaning. I looked at her, confused, until she explained she had overheard Sienna on a phone call, saying she had sold my jewelry and was planning to clean out the rest of my belongings. My heart pounded as Ruth leaned closer and said, "Your daughter-in-law talks like someone who thinks you can't fight back." Her words hit me like cold water. I had suspected Sienna's intentions, but hearing another person confirm them left me shaken. I tried to tell Daniel during his next visit, but the moment I began speaking, his phone buzzed. It was Sienna. When he put her on speaker, she launched into her usual lines about me being confused or mixing up memories. Daniel apologized before I could finish speaking. He kissed my forehead and said he would come back another time. I watched him walk out with his shoulders slumped, looking like a man trapped between fear and denial. After that, I stopped trying to explain anything to him. I saved my voice for Ruth, who was the only person who believed me. She spent her breaks in my room, talking to me about life outside. She told me about her daughter's school play, her dog that chewed up her slippers, and the little bakery she loved on 5th Street. Those stories reminded me that the world was still moving, even if mine felt frozen. Then something happened that shook the entire nursing home out of its routine. It began early one morning as I sat by the window watching the sunrise. A black car pulled into the parking lot, followed by another, and then another. 3 men stepped out, wearing dark suits, polished shoes, and serious expressions. They walked into the building with urgency, their pace fast and determined. Nurses exchanged startled glances as they approached the front desk. Residents peeked from behind doors, whispering. One of the men asked loudly, "Where is Evelyn Rowe?" The tone in his voice made the hairs on my arms rise. Ruth rushed into my room moments later, breathing hard. She said, "Evelyn, there are men asking for you. They say they need to speak with you immediately." My stomach tightened. The first thought that flashed through my mind was Sienna. Had she sent men to force me into some legal trap? Had she decided I was a problem she needed to remove completely? Fear clawed at my ribs as Ruth helped me sit on the edge of my bed. She squeezed my hands and said, "Listen to me. They do not look like the kind of men she would send. It might be important. It might be good." I shook my head, unsure. For months, every decision made about me had come from people who wanted to silence me, but there was also a part of me that wanted to stand up and take back something, anything, of my old life. Curiosity pushed against fear, and I finally whispered, "Bring them in." That decision became the first step toward exposing everything Sienna had tried so hard to hide. The 3 men stood in the visitor lounge waiting for me. and I felt my heart beat faster with every step I took toward that room. The hallway smelled of cleaning solution and old carpet, and my feet felt heavy as if the floor were trying to pull me back. For months, I had been treated like I had no voice and no sense. And now, 3 strangers were looking for me as if I mattered again. When I walked into the lounge, the tallest man stepped forward and introduced himself as Jonathan Hale, followed by Marcus Trent and Reed Albright. They spoke politely, but with a seriousness that made it clear this was not a casual visit. Jonathan gestured for me to sit, and Marcus placed a thick folder on the table between us. My hands trembled as I pulled out the first document. It was an old letter with my husband Michael's handwriting on the top. I pressed my thumb against the paper, tracing the curve of his familiar script, feeling a rush of emotion. Jonathan explained they were estate lawyers representing a business partner of Michael's named Warren Shields, a name I had not heard in years. He said Warren had passed away recently, and in going through his files, the law firm discovered a series of financial agreements and ownership records connected to Michael. I looked up slowly, not understanding why that would bring 3 lawyers across the state to find me. Reed leaned forward and told me plainly that Michael had owned a substantial share in a software company long before it became successful, and those shares remained legally under my name. My chest tightened as I tried to make sense of what he said. I had never heard Michael mention anything about owning part of a company. The lawyers explained that Michael had kept it private because he feared someone in the family might misuse the money if they found out. My throat felt dry as Jonathan continued. He said someone had recently attempted to claim that I was no longer mentally capable of handling my own finances, that someone had tried to file a petition using false records to take control of all assets linked to me. As he spoke those words, I felt a cold wave spread through my body. There was only one person who had pushed hard to make everyone believe I was senile. I lowered my eyes and whispered Sienna's name. The men exchanged a look that confirmed what I already feared. They had seen the paperwork, and although they did not know her personally, the pattern was clear. Marcus said, "Mrs. Rowe, the timing of those attempted filings matches the timing of your sudden placement in this facility." I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Memories flooded my mind. Sienna insisting I was confused, cutting off my access to my own home, taking my belongings, pushing Daniel to act quickly. All of it had been part of a larger plan. Reed slid the next set of documents toward me, showing financial transfers, forged medical statements, and records of property sales. He spoke gently, telling me, "Someone did not just want control of your home. They wanted everything you owned, including assets you never even knew existed." I sat back, letting the truth sink in piece by piece. Sienna hadn't pushed me out of the house because she disliked me. She had done it to build a case that would give her legal control over a fortune. For months, I had wondered whether I truly was losing my mind because the people closest to me refused to hear me. Now I realized her web of lies had been designed to make me doubt myself. Ruth entered quietly during the meeting and placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. She had risked keeping me informed of what she overheard, and seeing the lawyers there proved she had been right all along. Jonathan said the firm needed my consent to move forward with protective action, and once I signed, they could challenge every false filing and begin the legal process to return authority to me. My hands shook as I took the pen, not from fear, but from something I had not felt in months: strength. I signed my name slowly and clearly, making sure each letter stood firm. The moment the pen touched the paper, something inside me shifted. I was no longer the woman Sienna tried to bury in a room and silent. I was Evelyn Rowe, Michael's wife, Liam's grandmother, and the rightful owner of everything Sienna had tried to steal. Jonathan smiled kindly and told me they would handle the rest. I exhaled a deep breath that felt like I had been holding it for half a year. In that moment, I made a decision. I would not let fear guide me anymore. I would take back my life, my dignity, and my home. When the legal process began, Everything moved faster than I expected, and I felt as if I were standing in the center of a storm that was finally blowing in my favor. The attorneys worked day and night, gathering paperwork, tracking financial records, and collecting every shred of evidence that showed Sienna's deliberate manipulation. They kept me updated through visits and phone calls, and each update pulled back another layer of the deception surrounding my life. The biggest turning point came when a judge reviewed the forged medical documents that claimed I was mentally incompetent. The court-appointed doctor examined me personally, and after a long conversation about my memory, my life, and my current state of mind, he said firmly, "Mrs. Rowe, there is absolutely nothing wrong with your cognitive abilities." Hearing those words felt like a weight lifting from my chest. For the first time since the fall in my kitchen, someone in authority believed me. The judge immediately granted an emergency order clearing me of all accusations and ordered that I be released from the nursing home at once. I cried as Ruth packed the few belongings I had left, and she hugged me tightly before walking me to the front door. She whispered, "Go take your life back, Evelyn. You deserve it." I promised her I would visit again because she had been the anchor that kept me steady when everything else around me was falling apart. When I stepped outside, the sunlight hit my face in a way that felt like freedom itself. The lawyers drove me straight to my home, and as we turned onto my street, I felt a nervous flutter in my stomach. I had imagined this moment for months, but seeing the house again brought back a rush of memories. It looked exactly the same from the outside, yet everything inside had been touched by lies. As we pulled into the driveway, Daniel stood on the front porch looking pale and shaken. His hands trembled as he watched me get out of the car. Before I could speak, he rushed toward me with tears streaming down his face. He wrapped his arms around me tightly, crying, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I held him as he sobbed, and although I was hurt by his silence, I also knew he had lived in Sienna's shadow for years, too frightened of her temper to challenge her. When he finally pulled away, I wiped his cheeks and said, "We will sort this out together." He nodded like a child seeking forgiveness. The police arrived only minutes later, walking past me with a sense of purpose I had not seen in months. They knocked on the door and ordered Sienna to come outside. She stepped into the doorway with a look of confidence that vanished the moment she saw the officers and the lawyers behind me. Her face lost its color as they read her rights, explaining she was under investigation for financial abuse, fraud, and intentional coercion. She tried to speak, pointing at me and shouting, "She's lying! She doesn't remember anything!" But Jonathan stepped forward and handed the officers the documents, proving every lie she had told. One officer said, "Mrs. Rowe was evaluated and found mentally competent. Your claims hold no credibility." Sienna's eyes darted around in panic, searching for Daniel to defend her, but he stepped back and shook his head with disbelief. He whispered, "What did you do, Sienna? How could you do this to my mother?" That question seemed to break her. She dropped to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably as the police took her into custody. The moment the police car pulled away, Liam burst out of the house and ran straight toward me, his small arms wrapped around my waist, squeezing with all his strength. "Grandma, I thought you left because you didn't want to see me anymore," he said in a trembling voice. Hearing that nearly broke me. I knelt down and hugged him tightly, telling him, "I never left you. I never would. I love you more than anything." His tears soaked into my shirt as he clung to me, and in that moment, I realized how deeply Sienna's actions had scarred not just me, but this entire family. Later that evening, the attorneys sat with Daniel and me at the dining table to go through the rest of the documents. They explained that the shares Michael had purchased decades ago were now worth millions and were legally protected under my name alone. Their investigation also revealed that Sienna had tried to transfer ownership illegally by claiming I had no mental capacity to manage my estate. They assured me her attempts would never succeed. Sitting at that table, listening to every detail, I felt both exhausted and empowered. For months I had been silenced, hidden away, and treated as if I were worthless. Now the truth was out in the open, undeniable and strong enough to pull my life out of the shadows. Daniel apologized repeatedly, telling me he should have listened, should have paid attention, should have stood up for me. I reached across the table and took his hand, telling him I forgave him. I knew he had been manipulated too. I knew he had been taught to doubt his own instincts. The important thing was that he saw the truth now. The house that once felt stolen from me now felt like a place where healing could begin. And as I stood in the hallway looking at the framed photos on the wall, I felt Michael's presence as if he were standing right behind me, proud that I had fought my way back home. The weeks that followed were a slow but steady return to myself, as if every day peeled away a layer of fear and replaced it with something stronger. The house that once felt like a battlefield of secret began to look like home again when Daniel helped me unpack the boxes Sienna had stuffed into the attic. Each item I pulled out felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that she had tried to erase. I found the quilt Michael's mother had made for our wedding, tucked behind a stack of gardening tools, and when I spread it across my bed, it felt like wrapping myself in the past I had fought so hard to protect. Daniel worked patiently beside me, fixing shelves, replacing locks, and offering quiet apologies that grew softer each day as I kept reassuring him that healing mattered more than blame. Liam visited constantly, and his laughter filled the house in a way that made every room come alive again. He followed me as I watered my plants and helped me bake cookies the way we used to, carefully measuring flour and asking endless questions about his grandfather. Each time he tugged at my sleeve and asked if I was staying for good this time, I knelt down and held him close, telling him I was not going anywhere again. The court hearings time, and each one revealed more of what Sienna had done behind closed doors. She had opened accounts in my name, sold my jewelry through private dealers, and even tried to list the house for sale before her legal filings were complete. Sitting in that courtroom, hearing every action laid out clearly, made me realize how much danger I had unknowingly lived in. Yet, instead of feeling broken, I felt powerful. Every fact spoken aloud in that courtroom was a reminder that the truth had found its way out. When the judge declared me the sole and rightful controller of the estate, I felt tears slide down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from a deep sense of victory. Sienna received charges for fraud, elder financial abuse, and falsifying medical information. She broke down crying as the verdict was read, but instead of anger, I felt a strange sense of closure. She had tried to destroy my life, yet I stood here stronger than ever. Daniel, on the other hand, carried guilt like a weight on his shoulders, and although I forgave him, it took time before he forgave himself. After the legal storm settled, I met with the attorneys one final time to discuss the inheritance Michael had left behind. They showed me documents he had written years earlier, explaining why he kept the investment a secret. He wrote that he trusted me more than anyone he had ever known, and believed I would use the money wisely and with heart. Reading his words made me feel like he had reached across time to remind me of my own worth. I used part of the money to restore the house, keeping the same warm yellow paint and planting a new row of flowers along the walkway. I hired gardeners to bring the backyard back to life and turned the old shed into a small play area for Liam. I also set aside funds for his future education because he was the brightest part of my world and deserved every opportunity. But the biggest decision I made came from a promise I whispered to myself during those lonely nights at the nursing home. I created a small foundation dedicated to supporting seniors who faced abuse, isolation, or family manipulation. I wanted others to have the protection that I almost lost. I invited Ruth to join the foundation, and she accepted with tears in her eyes. She became the director of community outreach, and we spent our afternoons visiting different facilities, giving support to people who felt forgotten. Each time we walked through those halls, I remembered the version of myself who cried into her pillow, believing no one cared. Now, I walked in as someone who could make a difference. As time passed, Daniel and I rebuilt our relationship slowly and honestly. He sat with me one evening on the porch, watching the sunset, and said, "Mom, I promise I will never let anything like that happen again." I squeezed his hand and told him he had already taken the first step by showing up and choosing to see the truth. Life had changed for both of us, but it felt like the change was guiding us towards something good. One afternoon, while sorting through some old mail, I found a letter addressed to me. The return name made my breath catch. It was from Warren Shields' son. Inside the letter, he wrote that before his father passed, he mentioned Michael had left one last envelope meant for me, containing something he never had the courage to share during his lifetime. He wrote that he wanted to meet and hand it to me personally. I held the letter gently, feeling a familiar blend of curiosity and calm strength. My life had been torn apart and rebuilt, and now it seemed there was one more piece of Michael's story still waiting to be uncovered. I closed the letter, placed it on the table beside me, and whispered, "I'm ready. Thank you for listening to my story. If you want more real stories like this, make sure to subscribe to my channel and comment where you are watching from so I can welcome you."